Hi, my name is Monica Kretschmer. I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network, Woman of Inspiration Awards, and this is the Woman of Inspiration podcast, where we speak with women who lead, inspire, and motivate. These are women who take the road less traveled and inspire others to dream big. Now, today, a very special guest on our Woman of Inspiration podcast. She is one of our 100 Women of Inspiration book contributors due out this fall. With me today is Carolyn Levy, who is the President of Technology and Chief Diversity Officer for Randstad Canada. So welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
So we have so many questions to go through. And one thing I always share with our listeners is that we just have the most authentic conversations, with inspiring leaders like yourself. And one of the really leading questions that I have is, you've got this amazing title as a president and executive of technologies, chief diversity officer, this great big title. But do you remember when you were 12? Did you see that path for you, or where did your story start?
Wouldn't that be wonderful? So this staffing industry, I didn't know that it existed, let alone when I was 12 or when I was 25. So I did not know, but you know what? This is what I love about reflecting when I was 12, because I wasn't held to anything. I was very much agile and like water, like pour me where you want to go. What's interesting? Let me try that out. Very curious, try to be courageous all the time and try new things, meet new people and have fun. And that's what I applied. So going through school, I wasn't that person that's like, I am going to do this when I grow up. I was trying to think about when did I actually write that down once? It was when I was in kindergarten and I said I wanted to be a policewoman and I liked spaghetti, right? That was the last time I actually spoke about the career that I thought I might have. And it's because I wanted to help people. I felt, that servitude thing was coming through with me. So as I grew up though, one thing I did like was leading in groups. So when you think about school projects and you think about things, I was like, I liked to be the one that was like, hey, let's get together. What are we trying to achieve? You're great at this. You're great at this. I'm going to do this. Rah, rah, let's go. That's where I really started to love it. And I found I got like those goosebump moments, when I was leading or that we hit the end result or we did better than what we thought we would do. Those are the things that I like that kind of started to spark more after being 12.
Well, I find that always interesting because it's never a straight path. It's always a little bit of a zigzag. And so maybe you can share with the listeners, some of the turning points that sort of got you from, that 12-year-old with a vision of helping and serving to actually, carving a career path. Did you actually carve your career path with intention?
Right. I carved my career path with intention around the leadership piece. I was always looking for what the bar was and then how could I push it higher. So, I found that even in my first retail jobs, I came in, work with an organization, and they gave a training module to us and an actual book. And I hated the experience of reading through it. So I rewrote it and made it fun and made it engaging, right? To kind of switch things around. And that's when I started to see these pivots and things that I'm like, where can I go that I can solve a problem, make it better, or inspire someone? So I was always intentional in looking for opportunities that let me do that. And I surrounded myself with a very diverse group of people intentionally so that I was never pigeonholed into one way of thinking, right? So I was always looking like, what's another viewpoint? Or if I'm an extrovert, let me go talk to an introvert. So that I always am looking for something different and how to gather other people's opinions and thoughts, because I think I've been able to be quite innovative throughout my career because of working with people with all that diversity of thought behind them and then coming together to find a better solution. So those were pivot points, I think, through it, that every time I just realized it was kind of magnetic, I would pull over to, hey, is this influential around people? Let me go to that side of it. So that's why I tend to do a lot.
So I see the whole, of course, diversity, inclusion, equality has been a conversation in organizations for many, many years.
Yeah.
But it was a conversation within the walls of the organization. What's so exciting to see is that conversation that's expanded outside of the organization and really common language that's only really come to life, and really with greater focus in the past couple years. I would say even through COVID is
Mhm.
really powerful. So I would love to see, to share with our listeners. I mean, you're now got this great opportunity to really make change. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey within the organization that you're leading right now.
Yeah, for sure. So, 2 points I want to talk about with the journey in our organization is, for women specifically, is attaching yourself to a company that looks for people who want to inspire their own career path versus saying, like, I'm going to follow this. I was very much a pioneer in partnership with Randstad because our values matched. My personal values, the organizational's values matched. The staffing industry is incredibly important. We support people through the most difficult parts of their lives. We enable the economy. Like, there's just so many pluses that are there. And that's an important message. Like, you have to feel that sense of connection, that sense of belonging. And because I felt that with Randstad, it gave me the safe space to explore and challenge new things. And didn't matter what was going on in my life, I always felt connected. And these are two really strong points for me that I'll say. Both of the executive positions that I was promoted into, I was actually on maternity leave. So my first president role, to be the president of engineering, I got a phone call while I was on maternity leave, right? Or to be the president, not of engineering, sorry, of technology. I got a call while I was on maternity leave. To become, before that, the executive vice president for our staffing business, I got a call while I was on maternity leave. Like, being, a mother, like birth, all of that is so incredibly exciting. And it just was not a barrier in our company ever. I've never felt, I have to change my career path because I want to be a mom. I want to have a family. I want to explore that. That was more wholesome for me to bring forward. And what I have been incredibly intentional about through my career, especially with women, especially with men, it is a safe space. We have got to procreate to let the economy exist in the future. So stop being afraid of it. And I have to say, from a pandemic standpoint, this has been amazing. Because what do you know about me right now? From here up, you have no idea if I'm sitting here with an 8-month belly in front of me or not. Right? So this judgment factor has started to change. And actually, through the pandemic, I think authenticity, vulnerability, trust, transparency, all these human skills have come forward now. And guess who have amazing human skills from that perspective?
Women.
Women. So I've always been passionate about that. I've been, when I think about my purpose, and I always love exploring this, it's to spark joy in myself, in others, because that unlocks unlimited potential. And as we've done this, and I moved into the Chief Diversity Officer role, I said, you know what, I'm really interested to do this, but we have to drive change. I'm not coming in about awareness. If we are going to be committed as an organization to drive change, then I'm in for it. And now we're doing that. And when you talk about D&I, if you're still thinking that it's a business case, and present the business case towards D&I, you're a decade behind. And at Randstad, we're not. It's, how do we make sure we're open to marginalized communities? How do we make sure that we're reflecting the community we serve? How do we step out of the fear that we hold personally and be vulnerable and authentic and courageous behind it? Like, we have a homogenous leadership team at Randstad Canada right now, but we know it. And we're doing something about it, and we're going to change, and we will reflect the communities that we serve, and we will vulnerably lead through that, right? And I think a lot of organizations are still very scared. They have a lot of fear. They're like, what if I say something wrong? And people need to get over that stuff, right? So this is just this spot now that I was so inspired to say, how do we spark joy? How do I keep my purpose? Across all communities, across everything that I'm doing, in every effort. And a huge one was to step into that D&I opportunity, so that we could make sure that we were open and helping people from a talent acquisition standpoint, and creating opportunities for all communities, so that it's equal employment opportunity, right? So it's been an incredible experience, but that was me leaning into my purpose and leaning into my passion, and us creating a role so that we could do it.
Okay, so many things I want to touch on here. Number one is transparency. We talked a little bit about it in the green room, and we were referring to about, not doing any editing all the way through, because we want to be, it's about being transparent. It's about being authentic, being able to be vulnerable. And if we have, kind of fumbles here and there, be open to it. Don't try and cover them up. And I think that we're right now in a really important part of our time in our work, in our personal lives, where it's okay to be vulnerable. And so that transparency I'm going to talk about, and I would love to have you talk a little bit more about the transparency piece within an organization, because you said we're not there yet,
No.
but we're not going to stop talking about it. And I find the conversation that I've had, 75% say, you know what, until I get all the eggs in the right, well, ducks in my row, let's use ducks in my row, I'm not going to start talking about it, because I'm fearful of, not being able to meet the, the goals that we have for the organization. The other 25% are like, let's just say who we are, what we're doing, what we stand for, and figure it out. And I'm going to go with the 25%. So I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And it's perfect because people need to lean into that, right? About being transparent. And that can be one of the hardest things because it disrupts the span of control. And many organizations are used to the control piece versus saying, let's learn along the way from a co-creative standpoint. And, that's a big change, I think, in how leadership structures are and the hierarchies. Right? It's like, how do you hear the voices of the organization and connect on things about, what's working as a company and what's not. And I must say, with the pandemic, it's been amazing because organizations who have stepped forward and said, this is what's happening. These are the challenges that were happening. The executive team became very, very visible when, layoffs were going on, whatever was happening, we were looking out for help. Organizations that leaned in with that transparency, that vulnerability, and that honesty are the ones that are going to come out of this pandemic in an entirely different way, right? There's a prediction about a huge change. Like the great resignation is what it's called. And it's going to be people moving around to organizations who showed that through the pandemic, right? And that used to not be the things that, you think of. You look at results, you look at ROI, you look at conversion rates, and now it's, how did you actually give back from a CSR standpoint? What is your social responsibility piece to this? And how are you inspiring people to show up as their real self and show up as their best self? And if you want to expect that to get the best out of your people, you have to be transparent the whole way through. And, that's even a message to women as well. You have choice like no tomorrow right now. No, like, do not sit and settle anywhere. If it does not work, you're with an organization that's not committed to move, that can't speak where their faults are, get out of it. They need to start to learn that they have to do that. And like at Randstad, here's a learning, like we're about to create a landing page so we can be more transparent about what we're doing with D&I. Are we there yet? No, but it's coming, right? But that's where I'm open to say, yeah, we have so much to learn. And everybody does. I think those are one of those values that are just not going to go away. Transparency and leading with trust, vulnerability. Those are the things that we need in leadership, and they're here to stay for sure.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's a conversation that we need to champion on the road every single day in our conversations, is that transparency. And I think probably the best things organizations can do, and this is why it was like, be a visible, support her for our roadshow. It's like, if you're a champion for women, of diversity and inclusion and equality, just be visible about it. You don't have to have everything figured out, all like have it 100% perfect. And so I think that's a message for women too. It's like, and my next question to you is, when you were on mat leave and you got that phone call, do you remember getting the phone call?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that phone call, because then I have a question for you after that.
Okay, let me give you both. I literally know exactly where I was for the first time. I was in the parking lot at the farmer's market with my mom. She got out of the car and I was like, just a sec, my boss is calling. And I sat on the phone, and then he started talking about the opportunity. And my mom's like, what's happening? I'm like, I'm going to get a promotion, I think. And we started like whispering through the windows. And she's standing out there because my mom's one of my biggest fans, right? My dad, my mom, like, oh my God, she's just there like, take it, take it, just go take it. I was like, okay. And then the second one, I was actually wandering around in the backyard. My older one was in the pool. We were just kind of hanging out, and it was the same dialogue, right? Like, what, hey, I want to think about this opportunity with you. It was like amazing.
So was there ever a moment that you thought hesitation?
No. Was there a moment that I thought I had a giant fear ball in my stomach? Yes, but I did not hesitate. And that's a skill. No, I hate this term. I'm going to say it. It's the fake it till you make it. Like, no, but believe in yourself. Said, what could I do as a president if I could spark joy in the people that work for me? Where are we going to be able to go? So I gave confidence to myself and my purpose, and I said yes. Because as much as I have tons to learn, a crap load of faults, like all of that happening, my company believes in me. That's why they're asking. And the entire way through my career, which is an important message for women as well, we need that visibility as to where we're going, right? And organizations need to understand that. It's a two-way street though. You can't sit there and expect the company to come to you with your career plan. Build it. Say what you want. They knew that I wanted to continue to grow. I was looking for strategy. I wanted to do it nationally. I wanted to be like, make a splash specifically on the tech space. We wanted to get more women into leadership, more women into STEM positions. So I was very passionate to go that way. And the door opened. Why would I hesitate? I know exactly what that opportunity was opening. So I didn't. But oh my God, buyer's remorse. I was like, okay, let's have a bottle of wine. Can I do this? Wow, this is going to be so exciting and scary. But one of my favorite quotes, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And I have had the opportunity to dream repetitively with the company that I'm with. So what a gift, right? And I'm an intrapreneur, not an entrepreneur. I don't own the company, but I sure can operate as an intrapreneur and be inspired and thrive within the company that I'm with.
Beautifully said. And I couldn't agree more. One of my favorite quotes as well. I scare myself every single day, by the way. I'm sure you do as well. But I think such great insight. And I have to say, that is a barrier for most women. When the opportunity comes knocking at your door, they get paralyzed. And it's like, do I have the skills? And they start kind of going back and kind of seeing that's the job role. I maybe don't know everything than that job role. But what you nailed so clearly was they believe in you. And with that, it's a highway. Just go. Don't even hesitate, because that is one of the barriers that we as women take, is that those opportunities that we don't apply for the opportunity, or when it comes knocking at our door, that we don't take it sometimes because we don't think we have everything figured out. And I just love that you said, if they're believing in you, go. And so my next question is, building that thought leadership as an entrepreneur within an organization is super important. I actually look at the role of an entrepreneur and the role of an intrapreneur, and I look at the branding and the marketing and building thought leadership as being quite the same, to be honest. So maybe you can share with the listeners some of the things that you did to kind of say, hey, I really am interested in taking charge of my career.
Right. Yes. So it comes to leaning into the discomfort of asking for more. Right. And in the beginning, when I started on this path of thinking I want more, and I was careful with this because I know I'm a dreamer. For those of you who have done like the Enneagram, I'm an enthusiast. So one of the things you have to be careful about is always thinking that the grass is greener on the other side and kind of giving up on what you're doing. It's like, oh, I can just go there. Oh, I'm going to go there. It's like a lot of, I don't know, external influences can happen sometime, but I leaned into those kind of things when I felt them through my career and said, okay, what does this mean for me? What's next? Why am I feeling bored? So, like that, a little bit of self-reflection instead of saying, oh, I'm just stuck in the same mundane thing. I can't do more. I don't really have the experience yet. It was more like, hey, what am I comfortable with? Again, I'm telling you, go back to that purpose. I'm not sparking joy in myself right now or anyone around me. So what do I want to do? And it was like, okay, that was my first lean into leadership. When I left university. So I was in leadership in retail. I was running retail opportunities as a manager to go through school at the same time. And then when I left retail and came over to Randstad, I started to really feel that twitch around leadership again, only 9 months in. And then I was like, is this gluttonous? Like, I've been here for 9 months and I already want to run the branch. Like, what is that? But instead of, shying away from that, I leaned into it and started to have discussions to say, hey, I have interest here. This is where I feel I have a strength. But you know what? This is what I think I need to develop. And that's where that vulnerability piece comes in. And what, you need to know as a leader, like our leaders don't know everything ever. Sometimes, like, I would rather be the least smartest person in the room. I'll engage all of them, but then we've got the experts at the table that are gonna like nail it, right? So going in and leaning into that uncomfortable side, but then putting it as self-reflection that I know I don't know what I don't know, and I'm curious to understand. I'm committed to continuous learning. That's where every checkpoint I demonstrated that. And that's a leadership skill, right? In itself.
And so there's one other important thing too, is, just really relying on the experts all around you. But I think you said something interesting as well, is as a leader in an organization, how do you look for the people that are actually taking charge, and does it make it easier for you? I mean, because I think organizations are always trying to figure out, okay, so who would be a good person to sort of, help move through the pipeline and to build leadership within the organization. So by actually asking for that and showing initiative, you shine, right? You show your potential as a leader. And I think that's so important. So as scary as it is for ask, how else are you going to get there?
Yeah, exactly. They like shoot for the moon. What's the worst? You're going to fall amongst the stars. It honestly sticks. And you know what? I wanted to bring back one point just about women and hesitating and the sense of community, right? So no, you're not alone always. And when you're like, oh my God, hesitating and not sure, reach out to women around you to talk about it. Guaranteed someone's had that experience and everyone's there to pick you up. There are stats, and I'm just going to use the gender of male and female right now. There are statistics that show if a job position is put out and it says you need 10 years of work experience, a man with 4 years will apply. Like, I got it. I've got enough time. Did it for 4 years. I could do it for 10. Like, whatever, I'm going to apply. A woman with 9 might not, and generally doesn't. So when it's like, what? You're putting your own barriers in front of yourself. It's organizations seeing, like, don't write your job description that way. Make it more open so that it's not grounded in one learning style, or that's a very privileged way to say you need 15 years of experience. Okay, well, women's rights didn't like get introduced. Like, how long ago was it since we voted? Why are you putting so much stuff about the history of experience? Talk about problem solving, talk about all these soft skills, empathy that we can lead with, communication. Wow, pandemic communication is one of the most important things, right? So I just wanted to bring that angle in about the hesitancy. It is a systemic barrier that exists in the economy now for women, and you feel like it's failure or that you're not experienced enough, but it's just the environment that we've been exposed to. So just break the environment. Don't worry about putting glass slippers on your feet. Let's crush the glass ceiling together, right? Because it's still there.
It's more like a brick ceiling.
Right.
It really is still like a brick ceiling. And I have to say, we were impacted the most during COVID, but I have to say, and I would love your thought on this, I believe, because we had been running the marathon for hundreds of years, that we were the most prepared. And that's why the female leadership soared during the pandemic, because we were already prepared. We didn't know, we were handed a marathon to run the next day, but we'd done many of them before. We didn't train specifically for it because we've been training every day. So our muscles and our reflexes and our resilience muscles were already flexed. Do you agree?
With like hands down, it was the, well, sleeves up. Okay, let's go. What do we need to do? The multitasking that it took, the creativity that it took. Absolutely. And this is why I say, like, the time is now more than ever. Lean in, like the remote responsibility opportunities. At Randstad, for example, we're making sure that as we go back to office, that we have a hybrid model. that we're really going to demonstrate that decisions are made remotely. So your exposure to any of the executive group is irrelevant. We're really trying to stand into that. So yes, without a doubt. And we did it's called a Randstad Work Monitor. We surveyed 800 CEOs and HR leaders globally. And they said, what are the most important skills in leadership that you're looking for? Empathy, communication, and problem solving. What do you think every woman was doing? What was I doing when my kids were home and like 3 and 7, and my 3-year-old can't figure out what's going on? I was still working, hosting calls, getting yogurt breaks, sitting in the closet, drinking a glass of wine. Like, talk about how to handle a wild house. And so many people did, more than women, but that responsibility and recognition to women shifted huge as a result of that. Being like, I've never done it like this before. And many women put their hands up and said, whoa, I do this all the time. We just don't think about it when it comes to a work perspective, where we can be compensated for doing that instead of just voluntarily just being women and doing it, right?
Beautiful. Love it. And you know what? I'm just super excited about the momentum. And I think this is part of the conversation that we're having that I'm so excited to have. And I hope the listeners are just getting so much information out of this and we're getting everybody excited. But I find that so many times, Carolyn, is that we get people excited and then they don't know what to do with it. There is no next action plan. So, I would invite you to share how would you like to see women get involved more? Because I've got my own ideas, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah. So I think, sit down and think about your purpose, honestly, if you don't know it. And I don't think a lot of people do. Some people are like, oh, that's wishy-washy, or that's a very yogi thing to say. I'm like, oh, you can make decisions a lot easier if you're aware of what your purpose is, right? And we're thinking about it. Now I use the framework. It's not my own, it's from someone else, but it's that you're sitting and thinking, what am I good at? What am I interested in? What does the world really need? And then what can I share? And if you like, what's something you're great at that you can share? And if you can sit down and kind of self-reflect on what that is, I think that's going to be like a guiding light to everything for the future state of what women can be considering. So the other part of why I think women are like, oh, great, that was so inspiring. Oh my God, it's too much. It's overwhelming because all of a sudden you think like you got to jump into everything everywhere. So know your purpose, connect it to be like, let me try testing my purpose somewhere that I'm interested in something and try it there. And then I love Michelle Obama's stuff. Like, that woman is incredibly inspiring for me, but she said to think about things in threes. Connect to a woman that you're following and let that woman know that. Look for mentorship and sponsorship. They're two different things. Mentorship is let me, support you in what you're going on, critical thinking, etc. Sponsorship, and a sponsor of mine is a man, not a woman, to help you move up your career or through your career and help you remove barriers or help block or get rid of, not block, oh my goodness, wrong word. Help to remove a systemic barrier that might be there, that without their support, you maybe can't move into it. So think of, do I know who I am following right now? Then think of, who is someone that I am walking with, right? So that's where that collaboration piece, like similar challenges, brainstorming. And then from an inspiration standpoint, who am I paving the way for? And just think of 3 women or a man, from a front perspective, a man that are going to help you. And just focus there, connect to your purpose, try something that you're interested to using the foundation of your purpose, and think of 3 people.
Beautiful. And that leads perfectly into my next question. Of course, we are all about support her. The men that are allies for champion for women in their networks, workplaces, and communities, because a man doesn't take off his hat, leaving the door of his house to go to the office, to go to the community. Same person, it's just the culture and the environment. So big advocate for support hers. Tell us about the support hers in your world and why it's so critical for men to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. So this goes to childhood. I have to give the kudos to my dad. Like, he just is like, there's no barriers. They don't exist. I never thought of myself as a girl. I thought of myself as a person. He was always like, what do you want to do? Like, I was dirt biking. I hated dirt biking in the end, but I did everything. Anything I showed interest in as a person, he was one of the biggest champions to say, you do it, right? And my mom by nature, right? Absolutely, right behind, you think of the difference in generations on things, right? So as much as it's all the men, it's also women who, and I want to mention this because of that generational gap, that they had some ways that they were raised that she chose to challenge and not pass on to me. Instead, I don't want you to act in this traditional way. You chase your dreams and you go get them. Do you know? So there was a bit of a shift when you're dealing with some people from a generational change. And then as I moved through things, I mentioned, obviously, our CEO, I was promoted twice during maternity leaves. Like, these are just things that we don't talk about, that because of the organs I have, I miss opportunities, right? It was always, I value your perspective. You always are sharing, we're problem solving. You have the skills that we need, and we've been there together. But then on the same part of things, I was very involved with sports. And your coaches, you have an incredible connection with, and I've been blessed with some amazing coaches. And same, like from my brother standing there right with me, it just didn't matter. But there's one point I want to say here, because it's not, it's not easy. It's not easy to say this. I'm going to be super vulnerable for a minute. And when I think of coaches, I'm always like we just watched the Olympics. Let's give that as an example. You're like, oh my God, like that emotional, passionate connection that you have with your coach can just push barriers. And when the #MeToo movement started to come out, it's devastating. You see, even men and women and things that started to happen and what's come out in sport. I unfortunately experienced it myself and didn't lean into it. But what I did was not let that experience that I had with the vulnerability with that coach who took advantage of it with me become something that defined who I was. But because it happened at such a young age for me, it was a point in my life where I went through big trust concerns and said, am I that woman that, I can't trust men because I put all my trust into this person and he violated it. But that's not fair to paint a bias on the rest of the men who have been absolutely amazing and will be outraged. Some people don't know that about me. I've been very private about it. And they would be outraged to hear that happened, but it happens to everyone. And people think it's not going to happen to me. I feel terrible that it's happening to someone else. But I was that person. I was like, it can't happen to me. Like, look, I'm strong and independent. And it did. So I know we're talking about male supporters and everything, but for women who may be stuck because they've had an experience, don't paint that. That's part of the problem. If women are not going to shift, if they've had a bad experience, let a man come in to support you that you trust, right? Like, work on yourself so we can have more men feel comfortable to do that and not be afraid because of a previous experience you might have had. That takes a lot of self-reflection on women. It can be very scary, but we have to do that. And then I think it's just going to be embraced more with everyone. And I think more men will start to step forward to support us.
Oh, and I think it's, for starters, I just want to say I'm so touched by your authenticity. Because by you sharing that, you're opening up the door for other women to do the same. You're giving them permission. So I want to say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, especially when it's not something that you openly share with people, especially the public, like all the millions that are going to be listening to this podcast. But now look at how many millions you can impact, that it does resonate with someone that is not okay talking about it, but then can now sit back and think, okay, how can I actually make change, right? How can I use this experience for good? And I do agree that, men play such an important role, but there's so many ways that every person can play a role, right? As long as we know how we can support a woman on her journey, everybody can play a role, like letters of reference, champion it for her when she's not in the room. I mean, buy from women. There's just so many different ways, like LinkedIn reviews, my goodness, right? Key contacts. What are some of your other suggestions, like that you can offer our listeners today about how to help and support women? How can male champions support women?
Yeah, I think seeking sponsorship, going to women's groups. I'm a part of something called Women in Communications and Technologies. It's a national organization. I sit on the board for our Alberta chapter. And these are things where it's like, okay, we have a board that's all full of women, which is amazing, but how do we get men involved into the conversation? And many women's groups are trying to figure that out and asking that. And organizations are saying, how do we get more male champions into this? the men need to know that that's happening, and we need them to lean in to help support that, but to seek the sponsorship opportunities, right? So it's for women to drive this action. The men who you trust, reach out and ask them to do the same thing with 3 people. What's a woman that you follow, Mr. Him, right? Like, what's one you're walking next, and who are you paving the way for? Instead of it just being about, you historically. So that's something we've put into Randstad as an example. We're going to walk into a sponsorship program here. We have a very robust one in some of our operating countries around the world, but it's that we're sponsoring marginalized communities. We're sponsoring women so we get up to gender equity. We're sponsoring so we get to at least 30% representation, right? So it's pushing and having the dialogue. And what did we just come back to again is one of those 3 skills I told you that people are looking for globally. It's communicating, and that power of that, just ask the question. There's no failure that comes from it. You just might be uncomfortable if it doesn't go your own way. That's fine. Ask again, right?
Beautiful. What a great conversation I'm having with you. And I do have some questions for your leadership. I also want to know, who is that woman of inspiration to you, that inspires you? So we talk about that woman that's really inspiring. Who would that be for yourself?
Yeah, I have 2. From a public standpoint, it has been Michelle Obama for me. And I know she has been someone that's like on a big level, but if you get really deep into what she's done and the experiences that she's having, and what I love about her, she's freaking hilarious and has a massive sense of humor. She's super sarcastic. You see her showing up on the night shows, and like, she's just being real, and she's not being called masculine because of it. She's a woman because of it. So I just love that she stepped into being, incredibly authentic. And then I still link to someone that was one of the most influential leaders that I had early on in my career in retail, that she kind of helped me shape the values of what were going to be important for me in the future, versus being that like 19, 20-year-old that thought, well, show me anything, I can do everything. I had too much confidence, right? It was kind of, arrogance. Let's say it that way. I was like, yeah, whatever, I can do anything, no problem. And switching it from arrogance to confidence to be able to inspire people. So I hold her very near and dear, and she's a very private person. And this is the other thing, she's introverted, yet she taught me everything that I need to know. And I'm a massive extrovert, right? So I think that's also a message too. Leadership doesn't mean extroverted. Leadership is absolutely, it's anyone. It's going back to that human piece of it. And it's still those little, like a one call that you have that kind of inspires you. And then more officially, I have one more. See, there's 3. I couldn't do this properly without having 3. I got to work with a transformational coach, and, by accident, kind of stumbled into each other. I was going glamping in Southern Ontario, and she happened to offer services at the organization, and got to know her. And, every time that I connect with her, it's like I think my cells move, when I just feel like a different person, even with just an hour. It's like I can step into my true self always. And if I ever have any doubt, she helps me park the doubt, and then I can keep going, because I'm not sending that message to people. I have anxiety. In the middle of the night, wake up at 2:00 in the morning. I have no idea why I'm stressing over these little things, but she's someone that really helps, park things with me. And she makes it about developing me as a whole person. So I always stay authentic, whether I'm at work or outside of work. You don't see 2 different Carolyns, right? And that's I think an old myth to start to blow too, or a business norm, is leave your personal self at home, right? So she's somebody that's helped me do that. And I appreciate that you're asking that. And I think more women need to start to share their stories about who inspires and who supports them, and what is your story, and spend that time. Like, I could talk to you all day about why these women inspire me. So if I think myself, that's even a self-reflection. Who have I inspired in the last month? And if I haven't, I'm going to be intentional to go find a woman that needs it.
Beautifully said. And I hope that those women, you're going to forward this message to them, and they can hear the entire podcast, and they know exactly that, what they bring to the table. Because that is the other thing too, is that look at all of the words of wisdom that you've shared. How many women has that touched, or men, even just saying men, let's say people, have you touched from the point when this podcast is aired? and continues to be viewed and shared and listened to. We don't know the impact that we're making in the world unless somebody acknowledges you. So this is new. I haven't officially launched it yet, but I really want to encourage people to reach out and write those letters. Write those letters to the woman of inspiration that inspires you. Let her know the impact that you're making. Beautiful, right?
Absolutely.
And so your inbox is going to be flooded now, Carolyn, with all of these great letters and whatever. But that helps build confidence, and it helps pave the path for others. But also, when on your down days, it's like the roller coaster, that 2 a.m., you're going to go back to sleep and go, I got this.
Yeah.
So super cool. So I do have to ask, what is your definition of a woman of inspiration?
I think it's someone that looks to make an impact beyond her boundary. It's a woman of inspiration is someone that challenges the boundary, looks for the biggest impact to the community, like just knows the impact of the pebble in the lake, right? In what they do. So when they throw out something and the pebble drops into the lake, they understand the ripple effect. They understand EQ, right? And they understand the emotional wakes that they have in everything that they're doing. Now, that's like, well, you got to be kind of an expert to really grasp the fact that you do that. But when I put it down to even granular, it's someone who has really strong self-reflection. And I need to be real with this because it's the airplane analogy. What do you do if you're in an accident? You don't pull the oxygen mask and put it on someone else first because you could pass out and that whole thing happening. It's a woman who is confident to tell you they're wearing their oxygen mask. So they are looking after themselves first to be able to show up and share their truth, to be authentic, to be proud that they're caring for themselves so that they can actually be the pebble that goes to the lake that then creates the ripple effect.
Beautiful. And coming from a person that has been in the airline industry and has done many flight attendant demos, it's put your own mask on first prior to assisting others.
Yes.
So what a great interview. It's been absolute pleasure having you on the Woman of Inspiration podcast. I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation with you, working with you and your team on some, future projects. I think there's lots of synergies there. We can make an impact. Every single woman has the ability to make an impact in the world and really just fiercely step in and take those opportunities, I think. But what words of wisdom would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Oh, there's so many. And I'm such a talker, so I'm trying to claim this down a little bit. But, share your truth as much as it can feel uncomfortable. And people don't realize that, or I'll say it, let me be more direct here. You don't realize the impact that you're going to have or how important your truth is unless you share it. And so many women don't. And they just don't think, oh, my story isn't important. It is. As soon as you start talking about it, to the point we spoke to, you don't know who you're going to influence. But the fact that you're standing there and sharing your truth and leaning into it and just be authentic for yourself, like lean into what that looks like. And then my part is practice being agile like water. Your change is just something that's going to continue to come. Know that the economy, look at what happened in the last 18 months. So knowing how the economy is evolving, how society is evolving, the things that we keep learning, stay committed to continuous learning, which means you're being agile like water and be comfortable with change, right? So I think that's it. I'll stop to keep going, but that's it. Those are my points.
Well, I love all of your thoughts that you've shared with all our listeners today. I think there's lots of nuggets for the wisdom for the women that are listening, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you. So where can people get a hold of you, Carolyn? We'll leave them with a little bit of how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, for sure. I think universally easy. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Carolyn Levy. It says she and her. You can go in directly there. All of those messages come directly to me. Numbers float, emails float, but LinkedIn is just one of those platforms that are there. Just mention, I'm happy to respond to whoever, but just mention that you've heard it through the Universal Women's Network so that I can see the signal that's there. I would love to, any conversation, big or small, please reach out at any time.
Wonderful. Well, that wraps up our episode of the Woman of Inspiration podcast. Again, we were speaking with Carolyn Levy, who is the President of Technology's Chief Diversity Officer for Randstad Canada. And I look forward to seeing you on the road, Carolyn. And just please dive in, ladies, take that baton and lead with purpose. So have a great day, and I look forward to the road ahead.
Thank you.